He laughed as he unlocked the front door, the sound light and careless, like a man who believed his world was firmly under his control. In his mind, this was just another night where he could bend the rules without consequences. He had always thought of his wife as gentle, fragile even, especially now that she was pregnant. Too weak, he once joked to his friends, to notice what really went on behind her back. Tonight, he was about to prove that belief by bringing another woman into the place that was supposed to be their safe home. His wife stood in the kitchen when they walked in. One hand rested protectively on her belly, the other calmly stirring a pot on the stove. Her face showed no shock, no anger, just a quiet stillness that made the room feel suddenly smaller. She had always been like this, soft-spoken, patient, the kind of woman people underestimated without thinking twice. To her husband, that calm was proof of weakness. He glanced at the mistress beside him and said the words that would change everything, brushing off his wife with a smirk, calling her too weak to matter. What he didn't know was that the calm in her eyes wasn't helplessness. It was control. Years before marriage, before pregnancy, before this carefully built lie, she had lived a very different life. A life of discipline, balance, and strength. A life where every breath was measured, every movement precise. She had learned to protect herself not with loud words, but with quiet power. And she had learned when to stay silent and when to act. The mistress shifted uncomfortably, sensing something off. The house felt heavier now, as if the walls themselves were listening. The husband kept talking, trying to look confident, trying to prove that he was still the one in charge. He didn't notice his wife turn off the stove. He didn't notice her straighten her posture, slow and steady, like someone preparing for something she had practiced 1,000 times before. This was not just a story about betrayal. It was about assumptions. About how easily people confuse kindness with weakness. About a marriage built on lies. And a man who never bothered to truly see the woman he married. His pregnant wife wasn't just carrying a child. She was carrying a secret, one that had been buried deep for years, waiting for the moment it would no longer stay hidden. As she finally turned to face them both, the air seemed to change. Her voice was calm when she spoke, but there was something else beneath it now, something unbreakable. Her husband felt it for the first time, a strange tightness in his chest, a flicker of doubt he had never allowed himself to feel before. And as she took a single step forward, he realized too late that he had made the biggest mistake of his life. What happens next would expose every lie, shatter every assumption, and reveal the true strength of the woman he thought he knew. But the real surprise was only just beginning. The step she took was small, almost unnoticeable, yet it carried a quiet confidence that unsettled the room. Her husband frowned, confused by the sudden shift he couldn't explain. For years, he had seen her as someone who followed, someone who adjusted her life around his choices. Even during the pregnancy, he believed she depended on him completely. That belief had made him careless. He had stopped watching his words, stopped hiding his actions. And now, standing there with his mistress beside him, he felt the first crack in that illusion. They hadn't always been like this. In the early days of their marriage, he used to admire her calm nature. She listened more than she spoke, supported his ambitions, and never complained when he came home late. When she told him she was pregnant, he had smiled for the world, but inside, he saw it as another reason she would stay quiet, another reason she would never leave. He never once asked about her past. He never wondered why she woke before dawn to stretch in silence, or why her balance never faltered, even as her body changed. What he didn't know was that long before she became his wife, she had trained under a strict master who believed true strength came from restraint. She learned discipline, control, and respect for life. She learned how power could be hidden behind gentleness, how patience could be a form of defense. When she chose marriage, she didn't abandon that part of herself. She simply folded it away, choosing peace over pride, love over confrontation. And when she became pregnant, she became even more careful, protecting the life growing inside her with every choice she made. The mistress watched her closely now. There was something unsettling about a woman who didn't raise her voice, didn't cry, didn't argue. The husband kept talking, filling the silence with excuses and shallow confidence. He joked, he mocked, he tried to prove that nothing had changed. But his wife listened without reacting, her breathing slow and steady. She placed her hand on the table, grounding herself, as if reminding her body of its strength and its limits. Outside, a distant car passed, and the sound seemed to echo through the house. The moment stretched longer than anyone expected. This wasn't anger waiting to explode. It was something deeper. Test of patience. Ois. Her mind raced not with revenge, but with responsibility. She thought of her unborn child, of the future she wanted, of the lesson she would one day teach about self-worth and respect. Her husband finally stopped talking. The silence was louder than his words had been. He searched her face for fear, for sadness, for weakness. He found none. Instead he saw clarity. A kind of clarity that made his confidence crumble. He shifted his weight, suddenly unsure of himself, while the mistress took a step back, instinctively sensing she didn't belong in this space. No one knew what the next moment would bring. Would she speak? Would she walk away? Or would the secret she had carried for so long finally rise to the surface? As her eyes met his, steady and unafraid, one thing became clear. This story was no longer about what he had done, but about what she was about to choose. And whatever that choice was, it would change all of their lives forever. Her husband broke the silence first, forcing a laugh that sounded thin even to his own ears. He said her name, as if calling her back into the role he was used to, the quiet wife who would lower her eyes and let things slide. He reminded her of the pregnancy, of how she should be resting, how stress wasn't good for her condition. The words were meant to sound caring, but they landed wrong. They carried fear underneath, fear he didn't want to admit. She listened, her face unreadable. Inside, memories stirred. Long mornings in cold training halls, the sound of steady breathing, the lessons about knowing your opponent before they know you. She had learned that the greatest battles didn't always involve movement. Sometimes they were fought with patience, with timing, with the strength to wait. She wondered how a man who shared her bed for years could know so little about her. That thought hurt more than his betrayal. The mistress stood near the door now, fingers twisting together. From her point of view, this night was already a mistake. She had believed his stories, that his wife was distant, weak, barely present. But the woman in front of her didn't fit that picture. There was a grounded presence about her, something solid and calm. The mistress felt exposed, like an uninvited guest who had stepped into a private storm she didn't understand. The house itself seemed to hold its breath. Family photos lined the walls, frozen moments of smiles and celebrations. The husband glanced at them, suddenly aware of how fragile his carefully built life was. He had always thought control meant dominance, making choices without consequence. Now he sensed that control slipping away, not because of shouting or threats, but because of the quiet strength standing across from him. His wife finally spoke, her voice soft but steady. She asked simple questions. Why tonight? Why here? Why humiliate everyone involved? Each question landed gently, yet each one stripped away another layer of his excuses. He answered poorly, tripping over his words, realizing too late that confidence without honesty was empty. With every response, he revealed more about himself than he intended. In her mind, she weighed her options. Leaving wasn't as simple as it sounded. There was a child to think about, a future to protect. She had endured silence for years, not because she was weak, but because she believed in peace. Now peace felt distant, and clarity felt closer. She reminded herself of balance, of choosing the right moment, of acting with purpose rather than impulse. The tension grew thicker as her husband stepped closer, then hesitated. He wasn't sure why he stopped. Something in her posture warned him without a single word. He had always underestimated her, and now that mistake hovered between them like a shadow. The mistress watched this exchange, realizing she had never truly known the man she was involved with either. Outside, the night deepened, and the world went on unaware of the quiet storm unfolding inside this house. No doors slammed. No voices rose. Yet everything was changing. Secrets pressed against the surface, ready to break through. As the wife rested a hand on her belly again, protective and calm, one truth settled heavily in the room. This conflict was far from over, and the strength he mocked was only just beginning to show. The air between them felt tight, like a single breath held too long. Her husband glanced toward the door, then back at her, as if weighing whether he should leave or stay. Pride kept his feet planted. He had spent too long believing he was in control to walk away now. He straightened his shoulders, trying to reclaim the confidence that once came so easily, but it slipped the moment her eyes met his again. She moved slowly across the room, not toward him but toward the window. The city lights outside flickered against the glass, distant and cold. It was a small gesture, yet it made both of them uneasy. She wasn't reacting the way he expected. There were no tears, no raised voice, no dramatic accusations. That silence felt deliberate, like a pause before something important. He swallowed, suddenly aware of his own breathing. Behind her calm face, her thoughts were sharp and focused. She remembered being taught that strength was never about proving yourself to others. It was about knowing when to stand firm and when to step forward. Every instinct told her this moment mattered, not just for her, but for the child she carried. She had protected her peace for so long. Now she had to protect her truth. The mistress cleared her throat, finally speaking, her voice uncertain. She said this wasn't what she expected, that she didn't want trouble. Her words sounded small in the heavy room. The husband turned on her quickly, irritation flashing across his face, blaming her discomfort instead of his own choices. The tension between them cracked open, revealing how fragile their connection really was. That was when his wife turned back around. The movement was smooth, controlled, almost practiced. She stood taller now, her presence filling the space without effort. The husband noticed it instantly. Something about her stance made his chest tighten. It was subtle but undeniable. This wasn't the woman he thought he knew. This wasn't weakness. She spoke again, quietly, reminding him of promises made, of respect broken, of trust treated like nothing. Each word landed with precision. She wasn't attacking him. She was exposing the truth he had avoided. The mistress listened, realizing she was standing in the middle of a life that had depth and history she could never compete with. The husband tried to interrupt, but his voice failed him. For the first time he felt small. He saw flashes of moments he had ignored. Her discipline, her calm under pressure, the way she always seemed grounded no matter what life threw at them. Those memories connected now, forming a picture he had been too blind to see. The room felt charged, like something was about to snap. He took a step forward, then stopped himself. Fear flickered across his face, quick but real. He didn't know why, only that something inside him warned him not to push further. The mistress edged closer to the door, ready to escape whatever was coming next. Her wife placed one hand on the back of a chair, steadying herself, her other resting over her belly. Her eyes held his, unwavering. The past, the betrayal, the hidden strength, it all seemed to gather in that single moment. Whatever happened next would shatter the illusion he had lived in for years. And as the silence stretched to its breaking point, the truth hovered just beneath the surface, waiting to be revealed, while the audience could feel it too, the calm before a life-changing storm. The silence finally broke with the sound of a phone vibrating on the table. The sudden noise made all three of them flinch. Her husband glanced down at the screen, his face tightening when he saw the name. He hesitated before answering, then stepped aside, lowering his voice. The call was short, but whatever was said drained the last bit of color from his face. When he hung up, his confident mask was gone completely. She noticed it immediately. Fear looks the same no matter how well someone hides it. She asked who it was, not demanding, just curious. He didn't answer at first. The mistress looked between them, confused. sensing that something much bigger than an affair was unfolding. The house no longer felt like a private space. It felt exposed, as if unseen eyes were closing in. He finally admitted the truth in pieces. The affair wasn't his only secret. There were financial problems, bad decisions, people he owed favors to. Stress had followed him home long before tonight, and bringing the mistress here was just another reckless move. He had thought his wife was too gentle, too unaware to ever notice the cracks. He had been wrong about that too. Her expression didn't change, but inside something shifted. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. This was about safety, about the life growing inside her, about a man who had gambled with more than his own future. She remembered lessons about awareness, about reading a room before danger fully revealed itself. The signs were all there now. The mistress took a step back, her voice shaking as she said she wanted no part in this. She hadn't signed up for secrets and consequences. She reached for the door but paused when she saw the wife watching her, not with anger but with something closer to warning. It was clear then that the weakest person in the room was not the one everyone had assumed. Her husband started pacing, running his hands through his hair. He talked faster now, blaming pressure, blaming circumstances, blaming everyone but himself. He asked his wife for understanding, for patience, reminding her again of the pregnancy, as if that made her fragile. The words only deepened the tension. He still didn't understand who he was standing in front of. She took a slow breath, grounding herself the way she had been taught years ago. Calm didn't mean passive. Silence didn't mean surrender. She asked him one final question, one that stopped him cold. She asked if the people he owed knew where he lived. The look on his face was answer enough. At that moment there was a knock at the door. It wasn't loud but it was firm, intentional. Every muscle in her body tightened, controlled and ready. The mistress whispered that she should leave, panic creeping into her voice. Her husband didn't move at all. The knock came again, slower this time, heavier. She stepped forward, placing herself between him and the door without even thinking about it. The instinct surprised him. For the first time, he saw her not as someone who needed protection, but as someone who understood danger far better than he did. As she reached for the door handle, her face calm, eyes focused, the truth became impossible to ignore. Whatever waited on the other side wasn't just part of his mess. It was about to test everything she had kept hidden for years. And as the door began to open, the real cost of underestimating her was about to come into view. The door opened just enough to reveal a man standing calmly on the porch. His posture straight, his expression unreadable. He wasn't aggressive. He wasn't loud. His presence alone carried authority. Her husband froze, recognition flashing across his face. This wasn't a stranger looking for trouble. This was someone who knew exactly who he was and exactly what he'd done. Before he could speak, his wife stepped fully into view, placing herself between the visitor and the chaos behind her. She greeted the man by name, her tone respectful and steady. That single moment stunned everyone. Her husband stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. The mistress gasped quietly. The man at the door gave a small nod, one that spoke of history and mutual understanding. The truth unfolded quickly after that. The visitor wasn't there to threaten anyone. He was there to collect information, to close a chapter tied to her husband's bad decisions. And he wasn't surprised by her presence at all. In fact, he addressed her directly, acknowledging her strength, her discipline, and the path she once walked. That was when it became clear. She hadn't just trained in the past. She was respected, known, trusted. Her husband's voice shook as he tried to regain control, but it was gone now. Every lie he had built collapsed under the weight of exposure. His wife spoke clearly, laying out what she knew. Not just about the affair, but about the financial risks, the secrets, the danger he had brought into their home. She wasn't angry. She was firm. She had already taken steps to protect herself and her unborn child. Legal steps, financial steps, quiet, careful moves made weeks before tonight. The mistress finally understood the full picture. She apologized, not dramatically but sincerely, and left without another word. There was nothing left for her here. The house felt lighter the moment the door closed behind her. The visitor turned to the husband one last time, making it clear that consequences would follow, but not tonight. Then he looked back at the wife, offering a respectful bow before leaving. When the door shut again, the silence that followed felt different. It wasn't tense anymore. It was final. Her husband sank into a chair, defeated. He whispered that he never knew. She answered softly that he never asked. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The truth had done all the work. She told him she was done protecting his image at the cost of her dignity. She would leave on her own terms, strong, calm, and prepared. As she packed a small bag, resting often, mindful of her pregnancy, he watched helplessly. The woman he had called weak had just dismantled his world without throwing a single blow. That was the real power he had failed to see. At the door, she paused and turned back one last time. She told him the child would know strength, respect, and balance, not lies. Then she left, her steps steady, her future clear. And just as the door closed behind her, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. 3 simple words appeared on the screen, sending a quiet chill through her calm resolve. Training resumes tomorrow. The story wasn't ending after all. It was only transforming. She stood on the quiet sidewalk for a long moment, the city lights reflecting off parked cars, her phone still warm in her hand. The message didn't frighten her. It reminded her of who she had always been before life asked her to be someone smaller. She slipped the phone into her pocket and took a deep breath, feeling the steady rhythm of her heart and the gentle movement of the child inside her. Whatever came next, she was ready for it. The days that followed were calm on the surface, but full of quiet change. She moved into a modest apartment arranged with care, choosing peace over luxury. Her pregnancy became her focus, every decision guided by safety and balance. She returned to training slowly, carefully, adapting each movement to protect her body and her baby. It wasn't about fighting. It was about strength, control, and clarity. The discipline she had learned years ago now carried new meaning. Her husband tried to reach out at first. Messages came, then apologies, then silence. The legal steps she had taken ensured boundaries were clear. He faced the consequences of his choices alone, forced to confront the life he had taken for granted. The image he once protected so fiercely no longer mattered. In losing control, he finally understood the cost of underestimating someone he claimed to love. As for the mistress, she disappeared from their story quietly. No drama followed her exit. She moved on, wiser and more cautious, carrying her own lessons about truth and respect. Sometimes endings don't need noise to be final. Sometimes silence is enough. Months passed, and her world slowly rebuilt itself. She surrounded herself with people who respected her boundaries and supported her growth. Old connections resurfaced, not because she demanded recognition, but because her calm strength spoke for itself. She was no longer hiding who she was. She didn't need to announce it either. When her child was born, the moment felt like a reward for every patient choice she had made. Holding her baby for the first time, she felt a peace deeper than anything she had known. This was the future she had been protecting all along. A life grounded in honesty, resilience, and quiet power. Sometimes late at night she thought back to that evening, the door opening, the knock, the moment everything shifted. What once felt like a betrayal now felt like a turning point. It had stripped away illusions and revealed truth. Strength, she realized, isn't loud. It doesn't need to prove itself. Simply stands firm when tested. Her story wasn't about revenge or victory. It was about self-respect, awareness, and choosing the right path even when it's difficult. It was about a pregnant wife who was never weak, a man who learned too late, and a future built on lessons earned through pain and patience. And as she watched her child sleep peacefully, she knew one thing for certain. Underestimating someone can be the greatest mistake of all. Because real strength often looks like silence, until the moment it matters most.